In today's episode of Literary Appetites, we'll be baking a new favorite of mine and a staple within the fantasy genre, and that is honey cake. This recipe is courtesy of Preppy Kitchen, and I was particularly inspired to bake this by Darktown by Palmer Pickering, which is a fantasy lit RPG adventure. On with the recipe, you will want to let your butter get to room temperature and soften before whisking it in either a machine or by hand. Once soft, you can add your brown sugar and honey to cream together within this mixture. For the eggs, I found it best to crack them all into a bowl first. Then you'll add one each at a time into the batter, mixing well before adding the next egg until all incorporated. Once your eggs are fully incorporated, you're going to go ahead and add your vanilla and prep your dry mixture with flour, baking powder, baking soda, salt, and cinnamon. Once those are mixed together in the bowl, you can start mixing your dry ingredients a little bit at a time into the wet to incorporate them. The key here is to not overmix your batter, only incorporating small amounts of the dry mixture into the wet until fully incorporated. That is the key to beautiful texture within this cake. While that is mixing, you can go ahead and set your oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Finally, scrape down the remnants of the dry ingredients to make sure everything is fully incorporated within the batter. It should look something like this. Next, you'll want to grab a round cake pan. This is 9 inches, and I highly recommend using butter to coat this pan along with a round piece of parchment just to make sure the cake comes out smoothly. But that butter is going to crisp the edges of your cake beautifully. Once you put that parchment in, I still recommend putting in another little layer of butter. This is indulgent. We are enjoying our cake for a reason, folks. Once fully coated, you can place that cake batter right into the cake pan. Now, this batter is quite sticky. I do recommend having an additional utensil just to help scrape the batter off of whatever kind of tool you're using. You'll also want to lay it flat. As you can see here, I'm just spreading it out so it's as even as possible across the cake. It will even out as you bake as well. Once your oven is heated to 325 degrees, you'll place your cake in to bake for 20 minutes. In the meantime, let's talk about Darktown. Level 1 of Dragon's Crawl, a seamless blending of fantasy and lit RPG, following Temerity, a young woman, and her grumpy companion, Hobgoblin. This is filled with illustrations throughout the entire book. It's filled with adventure and depth to the characters, along with action. It is a fast-paced read, and it inspired me to bake this cake that I now love. With that timer going off, let's go ahead and take our cake out of the oven. Now, when you take this cake out, please be careful. The batter will still be hot and undercooked, but we're gonna move on to my favorite part, which is decorating with sliced almonds. This is optional, you don't have to add these, but I do love it on top for just not the visual, but the flavor as well. You can place them beautifully or messy, however you please. Once decorated, place it back into the oven to finish baking for another 20 minutes. While that's baking, let's prepare a cup of tea. This cake pairs beautifully with either. It has a balance of sweet and savory with a hint of cinnamon in the cake, and the crispiness with the texture on the edges, paired with the moisture on the inside of the cake, is impeccable with a beautifully steeped cup of tea. So yes, I am getting this ready for myself to snack on later. Finally, take your cake out of the oven once it's done baking and let it cool on a wire rack within the cake pan for about 15 to 20 minutes. You can see the cake here settling as the temperature changes. Once cooled, you can use a fork to gently pry it out of the cake pan and onto a plate. I find this plate from IKEA, of all places, works beautifully to serve and cut this cake. It is just the perfect size. If the paper comes out with the cake, you can just gently pull that out from underneath the cake at this point. And that's it. You've made your very own honey cake. Now, if you don't have a round baking pan, you can use a bread loaf pan. I've even used a mini loaf pan as well to bake these, and they come out beautifully in that size as well. Just make sure to adjust your baking time. Now let's take a look at the inside of this cake. My personal favorite way to serve this is warm with a drizzle of honey on top. It doesn't have to be much, but it just adds a little bit of that perfect sweetness to go with the cake. In addition to this recipe being absolutely delicious, it is also simple and only takes about an hour and a half from start to finish to do. So if you have not tried this cake and you want to, if you've been reading it in your books and you want to give this a try, please check out the recipe in the links below. And while you're at it, take a look at Darktown by Palmer Pickering, which is the book that inspired me to make this cake and video. Thank you so much for watching, and happy baking.